The Steam Next Fest is finally upon us, and for those wondering what it is, I'll tell you what it is. It's a celebration of upcoming games featuring games from all sorts of upcoming developers. While it's mostly indies that participate, sometimes you'll see AAA developers like Square Enix participate. And what better way to celebrate upcoming games than with a demo that you can play right now? Now, as I was making this video, not every demo was available because the Next Fest hadn't technically started. But some demos were available before the actual Next Fest began, so I got to try those out. This is part 1 of my Next Fest coverage, with my second part coming out sometime later. So today I want to talk about 10 demos I got to try out. But before that, if you like this video or any other video I've made, please like, subscribe, and share with all of your friends. Spreading the good gospel of high-tech low-life really helps me out in the YouTube algorithm. And while you're at it, why don't you check out Off the Console? It's a brand new podcast started by Gardner Bryant, Games Revealed and I. Sometimes we'll also have guest hosts as well. It's a great time. You should check it out. You can find our podcast wherever podcasts can be found, like Apple Music or Spotify. And of course, on YouTube, we'll be hosting a special live episode featuring Next Fest demos from this Next Fest. Come join us on Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. The first demo I tried out was for Nitro Express. It's a run and gun sort of game. Think of like Metal Slug or something like that almost. It certainly does work on Steam Deck, but there are some caveats. First and foremost, the game does not launch in full screen mode, and as such, things are barely readable. The way you're supposed to full screen this game is by pressing the escape key. There is no option to make the game full screen in the options menu at all. So to make this game run at full screen, you will need to assign the escape button to something. The demo comes with a tutorial as well as the first mission. And honestly, I quite like this game. The big issue I have, and that many people will probably have, is that the game is capped at 30 FPS for some reason. A game like this is begging to be played at 60 FPS. And I'm like 99% certain the Steam Deck could run this at 60 FPS if it weren't capped. I feel like this game being capped at 30 FPS is going to be a deal breaker for a lot of people, so I urge the developer to remove the 30 FPS cap or raise it to 60, whichever one ends up working better, I guess. The next game I tried out was Neon Inferno, and I gotta say, this game is pretty sick. First and foremost, the game looks amazing. I love the art style. And it shakes up the gameplay with some new features such as the ability to shoot in the background as well as being able to deflect bullets and even redirect them with enough bullet time gauge. And believe me, the game is pretty difficult on arcade difficulty, but trust me, it's so worth it. The demo runs quite well on Steam Deck and runs at a solid 60 FPS. Also, I might just be crazy, but does the main guy character kind of look like Jin Kazama from Tekken? Next, I tried the demo for the first Berserker Kazan, and I'm not sure if this is technically part of the Next Fest, but the demo did come out very recently, so I'm going to cover this as well. So this game is actually based on the Dungeon & Fighter universe, or Dungeon Fighter Online internationally. And honestly, it's an interesting take. It's a Souls-like, whereas the actual Dungeon Fighter Online, it's an MMO dungeon crawler beat 'em up combo extravaganza. And this is none of those. This is a Souls-like. Now, I don't typically like Souls-likes that aren't from Software, but with very few exceptions, but I'm liking the feel of this game already. I will say, this kind of feels like an in-between between Bloodborne and Sekiro. And the demo does run surprisingly well on the Steam Deck. Like, this is default settings, I haven't changed anything. And it runs, okay, maybe not quite at 60 FPS, but it runs at like 40 to 50. And if you're okay with that, you can just lock the frame rate to 40. And honestly, man, have you tried playing games on a Steam Deck at 40 Hz? It's great. It also has a more intricate gearing system, with gear having different levels and bonuses, and yes, even a set bonus as well. It's kind of like Nioh in that regard, though Nioh has a pretty complex gearing system, so I don't know if it's as complex given that this is a demo, but only time will tell. But you probably shouldn't expect Diablo level gear, to be honest. This game releases sometime next month, and honestly, I want to give it a fair shake. Next up is Void War, and this is probably the demo I spent the most time with. If you're familiar with FTL Faster Than Light, then it's basically like that, but instead of being Star Trek themed, this one is Warhammer themed. But there are some pretty key differences owing to the fact that this is more Warhammer themed than Star Trek themed. For example, there's a greater emphasis on crew customization. So in FTL, you mostly had different races with different abilities, but here you can also give them armor, weapons, tools, depending on their role and their race, and a greater diversity of mechanics and even greater differentiator between different races and ships and whatnot. In my experience with the demo, I went through an infernal void area, sort of. where most of the enemies I were fighting were demons, and their ships had a demon heart subsystem that handled piloting as well as summoning demons on my ship that I had to kill with my troops. Honestly man, FTL is so much fun, and if you like FTL, I'm sure you're gonna like this one as well. I am going to mention, like FTL, this is primarily a mouse game, so a little bit of Steam input customization is going to go a long way for optimizing this game. Now, if you can't wait for the game to release on Steam, here's what you can do. You can buy access to the alpha on itch.io, and the developers have promised that you can transfer your itch.io copy of the game to Steam when the game fully releases on Steam. The next demo I want to talk about is Touhou Makuka Sai, Fantastic Danmaku Festival Part 3. It's a bit of a title, yes, I will admit, but the game is quite fun. Now, some may argue that I'm insane, or I'm crazy, or I'm a lunatic for playing Touhou, especially the bullet hell variety, but you know what? I've been playing a lot of bullet hell games, so I think I'm okay at them. Now, obviously I only play this on hard difficulty as opposed to lunatic difficulty, but it's still got plenty of bullets for you to dodge. The demo gives you access to 3 stages. That's more than enough time to figure out if you want to buy this game or not, and honestly, I'm tempted to, man. The game runs quite well on Steam Deck, but I will say the game sometimes slows down to a crawl when there's truly a ton of bullets on the screen. I'm not entirely sure if that's a feature of the game or if that's just a performance issue, and to be honest, a lot of bullet hell games chug when there's a ton of bullets, and that's honestly a good thing because it gives you more time to, well, dodge them. Playing on any difficulty higher than normal difficulty is not for the faint of heart. While I managed to complete the demo, I could not do it without losing a few lives. Thankfully, though, I didn't have to continue, so it's technically a 1cc clear. Wow, that's pretty cool, I guess. The next demo I tried out was for a game called Pox Makina, and honestly, it's got some potential. It's part hack and slash, part parkour, and honestly, it's a lot of fun. The problem is that the controls are kind of slippery. To be honest, it's probably just skill issue. I mean, that's typically what it is, right? But anyways, I just think a little more polish would make this game a lot more fun. But it certainly is promising, so maybe I'll follow up with this game, see if this game gets more polish. As for performance, the game sticks to a buttery smooth 60 FPS, and I haven't experienced any sort of issues whatsoever, at least in terms of frame rate. Frame drops are kind of rare, but they only last for like a second, so it's more like a frame spike, but yeah, whatever, I guess. In Katana Dragon, you're essentially a ninja trainee, and it kind of plays like, I don't want to say Zelda, but like, it kind of plays like Zelda. When I see ninjas in a video game, I really can't help myself. I don't know why. The game is pretty fun, though I will say the game does feel kind of slippery, especially when trying to make precision dashes across gaps. And given this is more of an RPG with elements, it's hard to know how the endgame will shake out. But the early game is fun enough to where it'll make you want to go through it to get to the endgame earlier. The game does run quite well on Steam Deck. It runs at a solid 60 FPS, and it hasn't dipped even once for me when I played. Artis Impact is an RPG maker game that looks nothing like any other RPG maker game I've ever seen. The main reason why I picked this demo up is because it has a super unique presentation style. It's a very quirky game to be sure, but it almost has a manga or comic book style of presentation, and honestly, it's great. I must confess, I've yet to actually complete the demo, but man, this game is so kinetic and the cutscenes are so enjoyable to watch. I'm not sure what it is, but I want to play more of this. There's just so much energy, and all of this goes beyond your standard JRPG text bubbles. And while I don't think performance is super important for a JRPG, the game runs at a solid 60 FPS. I really shouldn't be that surprised though, because it's an RPG Maker game, but still, it's worth mentioning. Genokids is a stylish hack and slash sort of game. It kind of reminds me of Kingdom Hearts, to be honest. At least in terms of movement and gameplay feel, it certainly feels like a Kingdom Hearts game. Heck, even some of the movement mechanics in like the platforming sections, it reminds me of Kingdom Hearts 3D. You know which one I'm talking about, Dream Drop Distance. I will say though that the combat doesn't feel nearly as tight as like some other action games I've played. Certainly not Devil May Cry, but honestly, it's still really fun, especially with its tag team mechanics. I still have to get used to it because I'm not totally used to playing more than one character at a time in a game like this, but practice makes perfect after all. If you really want to master this game, you're going to have to play it over and over again. Thankfully, the demo is only one level long, so it's not going to take too long. I probably should have played this to get better looking B-roll footage, but honestly, I'm just basing this off of my first impressions. I need to get better at this game. As for Steam Deck performance, the game runs quite well on Steam Deck. It almost feels like a solid 60 FPS if it isn't entirely a solid 60 FPS. And finally, the last demo I tried out before the Next Fest actually began was for a game called Doll's Nest. It's being developed by Nitro Plus, and if you know who they are, they've made games like You and Me and Her and Song of Saya, so you know the story's gonna be really fucked up somehow. But aside from that though, this is a real game, like a real game, and not a visual novel. If I had to describe the feel of this game, it kind of feels like Armored Core, but like less weighty, if it makes sense. And yes, unlike Armored Core, this game is not mission-based, instead being a sort of world you explore, kind of like Dark Souls. The game defaults to maximum detailed everything, maximum graphical details, and honestly, my first recommendation is for you to turn down all of that to low so you can run this at a solid 60 FPS. But even then, the game will spike to like 30 FPS when you, say, for example, hit a crate or something like that, even on all low settings. The game runs at a solid 60 FPS, or if you raise the FPS cap, it could go all the way up to like 70 FPS, like solid 70, I would say. Now, I didn't do any of that for this gameplay footage because, to be honest, I kind of forgot, and like, well, I just forgot. And I don't feel like re-recording it, so yeah. As stated before, I haven't completed the demo yet, but there's a ton of loot around the map to really just experiment with many different weapon types. Shotguns, snipers, rifles, SMGs, physical blades, or light blades, laser blades, I'm not sure. And yes, you can have shoulder-mounted weapons too, like missile launchers and such. I guess you're not technically a mecha because there's actually a humanoid in there, but you certainly are like in a mech suit. You ever see that Tom Cruise movie, Live, Die, Repeat? It's kind of like those mech suits. Now, when this video releases, the Next Fest will already be in session, and there will be way more demos for me to try out. Just, I couldn't try out any of those because I recorded this before the Next Fest even began. So expect more coverage down the line later this week. Every Steam Next Fest demo I've tried out? Yeah, sure, let's do that. Hope to see you guys next time. If you like this video, please press the like button and check out our other videos. And if you like those other videos as well, be sure to press the subscribe button and share the good gospel of high-tech lowlife with your friends. Furthermore, we have a community Discord for enlightened individuals such as you. And if you wish to further support high-tech lowlife, be sure to check out our Patreon page. Links in the description.